Under the scorching midday sun of the Montana mountains, the silence was so profound that one could hear the wind whistling through the gaps of rusted metal. In the middle of a dry, barren clearing, no kingdom existed. Only an old iron cage sat desolate, like an exposed tomb. Inside was Alara. For 15 long years, her world had been confined to a few cramped square meters, thick with the smell of rotting sawdust and the stifling heat of metal. Once the queen of the arena, Alara had been forced to jump through rings of fire and perform cheap tricks until her joints grew stiff and her once majestic roar dwindled into weak, dry coughs. When she no longer turned a profit, she was discarded without mercy behind an abandoned warehouse, a piece of forgotten merchandise, gaunt and exhausted under the searing sun of the Old West. Just as that soul seemed ready to give up entirely, Sarah appeared. A veteran ranger with eyes that had witnessed much cruelty but never ceased to feel compassion. Sarah stood frozen at the heartbreaking sight. She didn't see a dangerous beast or a legendary creature in Alara. She saw a breaking soul, a grandmother enduring silent suffering. Sarah stepped closer, the heat radiating from the asphalt making every breath heavy, yet she knelt beside the cage. A miraculous connection occurred in broad daylight. Alara did not growl. She did not resist. Slowly, she extended a massive paw, calloused from years of imprisonment on concrete, and gently touched Sarah's forehead through the wire mesh. It was a wordless plea, an acknowledgement that after years of abuse, she had finally found a hand bringing salvation instead of lashes. She wasn't afraid at all, Sarah recalled through tears. She just softly closed her eyes, leaning her head against my hand as if she had been waiting for this empathy since a previous life. I knew I wasn't just rescuing an animal. I was trying to gather the shattered pieces of a queen who had been stripped of her kingdom. The journey to bring Alara to the sanctuary was a sensory overload. For the first time in over a decade, Alara no longer had to endure the jarring vibrations of circus truck engines or the whistling sting of leather whips. Instead, she was surrounded by the rich scent of mountain pine and the overwhelming stillness of the wild. When the transport doors slowly opened at the sanctuary, there was no spectacular dash for freedom as one might imagine. Instead, she retreated deep into the dark corners of the wooden crate, her clouded amber eyes filled with suspicion. For an animal imprisoned for so long, the darkness of the cage was the only safety she knew, while the vast open space outside felt like a threatening abyss. Sarah understood that this was a challenging stage of psychological liberation. She used no sedatives or sharp rods. Instead, she chose to sit about 50 meters away on a lush green lawn, simply holding a book and reading in a calm, steady voice. She wanted Alara to understand that human presence did not necessarily equate to coercion or pain. For hours under the sun, Sarah stood there like a part of the landscape, patiently waiting. She observed more closely the brutal marks the past had left on the queen's body, a tattered mane, patches of fur lost to malnutrition, and especially those for calloused, cracked paws from years of standing on cold concrete. Whenever she tried to move, Alara walked with a heavy, rhythmic limp, a type of stereotypical behavior common in abused animals, where they pace in invisible circles even though the cage walls are gone. Sarah explained to her colleagues that healing the body was the easiest part, but convincing Alara's mind that the cage had truly disappeared was the real battle. She began applying olfactory enrichment, placing tufts of wild grass, cedar leaves, or fresh bark right at the exit of the transport crate. The turning point came on the fourth day of persistence. As the sun's heat began to mellow, Alara started to catch the scent of damp earth and dry leaves. Trembling, she placed her first paw onto the green grass. The moment her flesh touched the soft blades, she flinched back as if she had touched fire. It was the first time in 15 years she felt the elasticity of the earth instead of the rigidity of steel and cement. She stood still, nostrils flaring as she inhaled, eyes looking up at the vast Montana sky, unobstructed by a cage roof. A forgotten queen stood bewildered in her own kingdom, Try to understand that from now on, the iron walls had vanished forever into the past. After those first hesitant steps on the grass, Alara began a journey even more arduous, learning to trust a human once again. Sarah knew that scars on the flesh might fade, but the ghosts of betrayal and pain in Alara's mind were invisible wounds that required a special kind of medicine, the language of patience. Every day, Sarah established an unchanging routine. She did not rush to approach. She chose to appear as regularly as the breath of nature. She spent hours performing the slow blink, a characteristic peace signal of big cats. In a lion world, staring is a threat, but a slow, prolonged blink is an affirmation. I mean you no harm. I trust you. Sarah persistently sent that signal for weeks, waiting for the day Alara would respond, even with the smallest squint. The greatest challenge lay in practical medical issues. Years of abuse had left Alara's teeth badly damaged and her joints severely weakened by calcium deficiency. She needed regular medical treatment, but the thought of being touched by humans or cornered always sent Alara into a state of extreme panic. Instead of using force or restraint, Sarah patiently applied positive reinforcement. She turned medical sessions into gentle communication, using small pieces of meat as rewards to encourage Alara to voluntarily enter the medical exam area. Every centimeter Alara moved forward without trembling was a resounding victory for Sarah. She did not force. She only opened a door and patiently waited for Alara to walk through it herself. One afternoon, a sudden thunderstorm broke over the Montana Kingdom. For a circus lion, the booming thunder and flashes of lightning across the sky were always associated with loud performances, shouting, and the fear of punishment. Alara retreated into the darkest corner of her shelter, her whole body shaking violently, her dull eyes reflecting the trauma of the past. Sarah did not leave her. She sat in the observation room nearby, separated only by the wire mesh, and began to talk through the rain. Her voice was low and steady, blending into the sound of the rainfall. This was the moment the line between rescuer and rescued began to blur. They became two solitary souls leaning on each other to weather the storm. Sarah whispered to Alara about her own frustrations and exhaustion over her years of work. About times she too wanted to give up, but found strength looking into the eyes of creatures like Alara. We are both looking for a place where we no longer have to perform for anyone, aren't we, girl? Sarah murmured. As the storm faded, Alara was no longer huddled. She slowly stepped out and lay down in the loaf position, a sign of absolute security, with her paws tucked neatly under her chest. And then, in the pale light after the rain, Alara turned towards Sarah for the first time and emitted a soft prussin, the characteristic sneezing sound lions used to greet and show friendliness. It was the first thank you, a milestone marking that the kingdom of trust had been officially established. Recovery was not merely about healing physical wounds. It was a revolution to reclaim a stolen identity. During this phase, Alara began to undergo a true awakening. As her chronic pain subsided thanks to dedicated medical care, her true personality began to bloom. Surprisingly, Alara was not a fierce or aggressive predator. She revealed herself to be a calm queen, a curious observer of the world around her. She spent hours watching local magpies perch near the fence with eyes of gentle curiosity rather than hunger. Sarah realized that after 15 years of being forced to be a beast in a circus, Alara was finally allowed to live according to her naturally peaceful nature. To help Alara find her instincts, Sarah introduced enrichment activities. She placed giant rubber balls and ancient logs in the enclosure. For the first time, Sarah and the sanctuary staff were moved to tears watching Alara play. A lion weighing over 100 kilograms, once old and tired, was now clumsily batting at a ball like a kitten exploring the world. Those movements were initially awkward due to joint issues, but gradually they became fluid and full of life. Alara was no longer a slave jumping through fire for food. She was playing for her own joy, a fundamental right she had been deprived of since she was a cub. However, The pinnacle of this awakening did not lie in games, but in the forgotten roar. For months since arriving at the sanctuary, Alara had been completely silent. Her vocal cords seemed to have withered after years of only emitting groans of pain. But on a crisp autumn morning, as the first rays of sun touched the mountain peaks and dyed the Montana Valley gold, a miracle happened. Alara stepped onto the highest rock in her area, standing tall with a majesty that no circus could ever teach. She took a deep breath, her chest expanding, and then a deep, thunderous sound shook the air. It was not a roar of anger or threat. It was a declaration of existence. That roar echoed through the canyons, vibrating the old pine branches and silencing the other animals in the sanctuary in respect. Sarah stood in the distance, the coffee cup in her hand trembling with the rhythm of that sound, her tears falling uncontrollably. The circus had tried to steal Alara's voice, but nature and love had returned it all. That roar was a testament that no matter how suppressed a soul might be, it can always find its strength again. The story of Alara's revival began to spread. Local children sent hundreds of letters and drawings of Queen Alara, turning her into a symbol of hope, that it is never too late to start over, and that age or past trauma can never diminish the dignity and peace of a living being. As the melodies of the Montana wilderness shifted into the gentle rhythm of the late afternoon, Alara's image appeared as a living testament to the power of rebirth. No longer a sorrowful skeleton locked in an iron cage, Alara now wore a thick, smooth coat that shimmered under the sun. Her amber eyes were no longer dull or filled with fear. They were clear, reflecting the majesty and calm of a queen who had truly found her kingdom. Though Alara would never be able to return to the wild savannas of Africa due to her age and the survival skills stripped from her since youth, here, among the green hills of Montana, she had found an eternal kingdom, a place where freedom was measured not by land area, but by peace of mind. Sarah often spent the final minutes of the day sitting quietly by the perimeter fence, observing her special friend. She reflected on the invaluable lesson Alara had taught her, that being abandoned does not mean the end. In a modern world full of hustle, where things that are old and no longer useful are often pushed aside, Alara was a gentle reminder of the value of dignity. Sarah understood that this journey of redemption was not one-sided. She had saved Alara from the iron cage, but Alara had saved her from emotional callousness, reminding her why she chose this path, to protect souls who cannot protect themselves. The most moving moment occurred as the sunset descended, painting the sky red. Like a ritual of trust, Alara slowly walked toward where Sarah sat. She didn't roar, she didn't perform. She simply approached and leaned her massive, heavy head against the wire mesh, right next to Sarah's position. It was an image of the purest respect and love, a connection transcending the boundary between human and beast. She will spend the rest of her life here, Sarah said with a satisfied smile, to feel the warmth of the sun, smell the rain on the wind, and most importantly, to know she is loved for exactly who she is, not for what she can do to entertain. Alara's story did not stop within the boundaries of the sanctuary. It became a legacy, a silent call sent out to the community. We often look at old animals, senior dogs, or creatures past their prime and view them as burdens. But Alara proved the opposite. The final years of life can be the most brilliant if there is love. The connection between Sarah and Alara lit a flame of hope, encouraging people to open their hearts to forgotten lives, to understand that every second chance we give can create a miracle. Alara's story is a reminder that there are thousands of other Alaras waiting in the dark. Not just lions, but living beings of all species who have been discarded because they are old or no longer useful. Today, you can become this Sarah in someone's life. Do not just look for perfection. Look for souls that need healing. Because after all, there's a truth we must always remember. We do not save them because they are strong. We save them so they can remember how strong they once were.